Kenyan riot police fire tear gas and water cannons against protesters in Nairobi.
Local reports say opposition members gathered outside government offices to complain of a cost of living crisis. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I am Ricky Matay.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Senator calls off debate of lawmakers on the proposed amendments to the 1987 Constitution. Marcos administration aims for 100% nationwide electrification. Major oil price rollback set for tomorrow. International expert doubts enforceability of ICC arrest order against Russian President Vladimir Putin. And China Xi Jinping to promote peace talks with Russia and Ukraine. Leaders of both the House of Representatives and the Senate discussed over the weekend to thresh out issues concerning the proposed charter amendments. House Speaker Martin Romualdez says Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri assured him that he will keep an open mind to amendments in the economic provisions of the Constitution, which lawmakers in the lower chamber passed in the plenary. Romualdez says he hopes that other senators will be like Zubiri and keep their position open with Cha-Cha. The Speaker says Zubiri is awaiting the committee report on the Senate Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revisions of Codes chaired by Senator Robin Hood Padilla. There has been a discourse between lawmakers from both chambers with Cha-Cha through the Hybrid Constitutional Convention or CONCON.
The scheduled debate of lawmakers from the Senate and the House of Representatives did not push through today. The two chambers were set to tackle the economic provisions on the proposed amendments in the 1987 Constitution. Mean Corvera has the story.
No debates took place today between members of the Senate Committee on Constitutional Amendments with their counterparts in the House of Representatives. Senator Robin Padilla, chairman of the committee, invited members of the House Committee headed by Congressman Rufus Rodriguez to ask them why they are pushing for constitutional convention as opposed to the Constituent Assembly that most senators preferred as mode for Cha-Cha.
Kasi sila yung nagsulong ng CONCON. Gusto ko bigyan sila ng fair time dito sa Senado. Kasi ganun yun eh. Dadaling ko yung kanilang pinadala dito sa Senado, gagawin ko ng committee report yun. So ako, kumbinsihin nyo ako. Kumbinsihin nyo ako dahil ako ang gagawa ng committee report. Kaya marami akong tanong sa inyo.
But Congressman Rodriguez expressed disappointment because after the Senate's invitation on March 14, he only received the cancellation notice last night, March 19. Aside from Rodriguez, those who confirmed their attendance for the hearing included Representatives Richard Gomez, Mariby Copilar, and Divina Grace. But Padilla says he was forced to cancel the hearing after Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri ordered him to do so. Last Saturday, Cavite Representative Elpidio Barzaga appealed to his colleagues to sit and discuss any disagreements with the proposed Cha-Cha. Barzaga says the word war between senators and congressmen on the issue has become shameful. But Padilla said Zubiri decided to call an executive session with the senators and House leaders to discuss the issue. Padilla admitted that he did not seek permission from the Senate and House leadership when he invited congressmen for the hearing.
Malungkot po. Hindi naman po masama ang loob kasi ako po ay soldier eh. Kailangan pag sinabi ng commander ko na si Senator President Mig Zubiri, susunod po ako. Malungkot ako din na tuloy kasi gusto ko talaga magkabakbakan eh. Oo, ito na talaga yung inaantay ko. Kaya nga kami mga para po kasi sa akin yung mga ganitong issue talaga, marinig ng taong bayan. Gusto ko talaga marinig ng taong bayan. Pero siyempre, ako po ay bago dito sa pagiging mambabatas. Hindi kailangan akong sumunod sa mga bagay na sinasabi nila na tradisyon at interparliamentary courtesy. Yun po ang tawag nila. Ay kailangan po akong sumunod.
Subiri agreed with the ceasefire call of Congressman Barzaga.
We heed the call of Congressman Elpidio Barzaga for a ceasefire and the heated discussions on charter change, calling instead for the leadership of both houses of Congress to hold a caucus where we can have a productive discussion on the matter, rather than everyone airing their grievances in
Subiri admitted that he called off the hearing and stressed that incumbent member of a co-equal branch of legislature cannot be made a resource person in respect of interparliamentary courtesy. As a rookie senator, Subiri said Padilla may not know about the rules. Mayan Corvera for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The government is eyeing a 100% electrification of the country within the term of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The administration is also encouraging the public to save energy in time for the dry season. Madirin Villar Moratillo has the details.
The Marcos administration is serious in its goal to supply the country with electricity. In his vlog, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. shared his aspiration to provide 100% electricity to the whole country through the establishment of various energy infrastructures such as power plants. Data from 2021 shows that the country's household electrification rate is 95.41. A majority of which is in Luzon.
Upang magkaroon ng mura, sapat at maaasahang supply ng kuryente. Sa pagtatayo ng iba't ibang energy infrastructure gaya ng power plant, magkakaroon tayo ng mas maraming pagkukuhanan ng kuryente. Layon ding marating ang mga lugar na wala pang ilaw bilang ating patuloy na misyon na makamit ang 100% electrification ng buong Pilipinas.
The country faces three energy insecurity problems that include fast-growing electricity demand, not enough supply of electricity to meet the demand, and the discrepancy in electrification rate between cities and rural areas. Meanwhile, the Presidential Communications Office, or PCO, reminded the public of the onset of the dry season. The PCO encourages the public to intensify their energy consumption in their houses and even in workplaces.
Dahil papasok na naman ngayon ng summer, well, para makatipid tayo sa kuryente, ang tip ko lang, katulad sa amin, sa bahay namin, ina-unplug muna namin mga appliances na hindi naman dapat ginagamit. And then, yung pag magpa-plansya kami, isahan na lang. And then, pag magluluto naman ng sa rice cooker, isahang saingan na lang para tipid.
Ganun nga sir, pag dalawa electric pan namin, isa na lang ginagamit namin para makatipid. Tapos pag TV naman, hindi kami masyadong nanonood. Tapos sa mga pagluluto, gasol naman po kami gumagamit. Minsan lang din kami gumamit ng rice cooker. Oven, minsan lang din po.
Pagdating sa appliances gaya ng ref, wag siyang bubuksan ng malakas, matagal kasi medyo malakas siya konsumo ng kuryente. Pangalawa, sa mga natutulog na gumagamit ng aircon, i-minimize natin yung paggamit ng aircon. Kung hindi naman siya ganun kainit, wag nating ibuksan ng buong magdamag. Yun. Tapos pagdating naman sa mga electric appliances na umiinit, instead na gamitin natin sila 3 times a day, possible lang hanggat maaari, i-minimize natin wag natin silang gamitin o kung humanap tayo ng paraan, ibang way para makapagluto.
Madilim Villar Moratillo for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Oil companies are expected to lower down fuel prices on Tuesday, March 21. Initial advisories say gasoline prices may be reduced between 1 peso and 20 centavos up to 1 peso and 50 centavos per liter. Meanwhile, diesel prices will be deducted between 1 peso and 70 centavos up to 2 pesos per liter. Kerosene, on the other hand, will have a rollback of 1 peso and 90 centavos up to 2 pesos and 20 centavos per liter. Director Rodela Romero of the Department of Energy's Oil Industry Management Bureau says the adjustment was caused by the spillover on the oil market with fears on the Silicon Valley Bank collapse in the United States. The SVB is the 16th largest commercial bank in the United States that collapsed after its clients withdrew their deposits within 48 hours.
The government is losing 5 million pesos every day due to the fishing ban imposed in the areas affected by the oil spill from the sunken MT Princess Empress. Chief Information Officer Nazario Briguera of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, or BFAR, says more than 19,000 fishermen from 9 municipalities of Oriental Mindoro are affected by the oil slick and have no other means of livelihood. Oriental Mindoro Governor Humerlito Dolor earlier says the fishing ban was imposed out of fear of water intoxication, which affected the livelihood of half of the province's residents. The BFAR assures that there will be no shortage of fish supply, despite reports that the oil spill has already spread to Antique, Palawan, and Batangas. Latest data from the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, shows that 32,000 families, or 151,000 individuals, are now affected by the oil spill incident.
Officials from the Philippines and the United States announced they will soon reveal the 4 additional military bases that American troops will be allowed to use. It has been widely reported that 2 of the sites will be in the northern province of Cagayan. These locations are less than 400 kilometers from Taiwan. Cagayan Governor Manuel Mamba has publicly opposed having EDCA sites for fear of jeopardizing Chinese investment and becoming a target in a conflict over Taiwan. But Philippine Acting Defense Chief Carlito Galvez said the government had already decided on the sites and Mamba had agreed to abide with the decision. The longtime treaty allies agreed last month to expand cooperation in strategic areas of the Philippines to counter China's growing assertiveness.
The finance officer of embattled Oriental Mindoro Congressman Arnie Teves will charge the rating team of the Philippine National Police Criminal Detection Group, or PNP-CIDG, with a human rights violation. The PNP-CIDG led the rating team, which served the search warrant issued by the court in properties owned by Teves in Negros Oriental. Attorney Toby Tiangco, counsel for Congressman Teves, says that the lawmaker's finance officer, Hannah May Oray, experienced serious mental and psychological torture under the hands of the rating team. In her complaint to be filed before the Human Rights Commission, Oray says she was detained for 5 days and was coerced by PNP-CIDG operatives to admit that she paid the alleged assailants of Negros Oriental Governor Roel Degamo. Diokno said that even Oray's husband, Heracleo Oray, was detained and charged with illegal possession of firearms even though he has a license for the weapons. They allege the PNP-CIDG operatives floated that his license to own firearms and permit to carry firearms outside residence were revoked. Diokno added that Oray also plans to file criminal charges against CIDG operatives before the court once they have submitted the evidence.
Yung psychological torture na sinasabi namin dito, una, pagmula umpisa, no? Nung inaresto ka, na wala ka namang walang dahilan. Pangalawa, ang sinasabi ni, papatunayan naman ni Hannah May, na siguro every 2 hours, no, pagkalagay sa selda, walang oras na pinipili, sila daw ay biglang pinapatawag, no? Pinapatawag siya at yun, pinipilit kung ano-ano mga sinasabi. Pinapapirma siya ng mga dokumento na sinasabi na may nakuhang granada, pag-aamin na may nakuhang granada sa kanyang bahay, no? At sinasabi nga na aminin na siya ang nagbabayad sa mga supposed killers daw, no? So yan, bukod dyan, tinatakot siya ng pagkakakulong. Tinatakot siya ng sasampahan ng iba't ibang klaseng kaso. No? Idadawit din siya doon sa 2019 case. Binabanggitan siya tungkol sa mga drugs. So marami.
Two Mindanao provinces have logged a higher COVID-19 positivity rate in the last 7 days. In a tweet, Octa research fellow Dr. Guido David says Misamis Oriental and South Cotabato have higher positivity rates on March 18 with 17.1% and 13.2% respectively. Metro Manila's 7-day positivity rates remain below 5%, but it increased to 3.2% on March 18 from 2.2% from the previous week. Data from the Department of Health, or DOH, shows the country's nationwide positivity rates is 3.3%. On Sunday, the DOH logged 185 new infections with 7 deaths. The country has 9,290 active cases with 158 recoveries. Coming up, 6.8 magnitude earthquake leaves more than a dozen dead and others trapped in South America. International experts doubt enforceability of ICC arrest order against Russian President Vladimir Putin. And North Korea simulates tactical nuclear strike. More stories from around the globe in Mata ng Agila International returns. Stay tuned. Mata ng Agila International. More than a dozen people are dead and hundreds more missing after 6.5 magnitude earthquake struck Ecuador and Peru on the weekend. Ecuador's President Guillermo Lasso, who traveled to the affected region, said on Sunday that reconstruction work would begin immediately. The government has made available all urgent economic resources so that work to repair damaged private and public buildings will begin. Authorities began work on roads in Azuay where transport had been blocked by 22 landslides. Brazil's Ministry of Foreign Relations said the country was ready to provide all possible cooperation to these countries to deal with the humanitarian emergency. On Saturday, Chile likewise had pledged to help.
The International Criminal Court has issued a warrant of arrest against Russian President Vladimir Putin over the weekend for war crimes involving illegal deportation of Ukrainian children. But an international relations expert questions the enforceability of the arrest order. Here's Paulo Ramos for the details.
An international relations expert doubts if the warrant of arrest issued by the International Criminal Court, or ICC, against Russian President Vladimir Putin can be enforceable. In an interview on Net25's Ano sa Palagay Nyo, or ASPN, Dean Carlos Tabunda of New Era University's International Relations Studies cited the realities on the enforceability of international agreements such as the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Dean Tabunda says Russia is a signatory of the Rome Statute in 1998 but withdrew its membership in 2016.
Meron bang enforceability? Yun ang question. Actually, ito yung issue lagi sa mga international organizations. may mga napagkasunduan na mga kailangan sundin yung mga bansang nakipirma doon sa mga statutes na ito. Pero ang tanong, ito ba ay merong enforceability? Yung sa Russia, gusto ko lang i-clarify, Russia was a signatory to the Rome Statute noong 1998. Pero noong 2016, bigla siyang humiwalay, bigla siyang kumalas sa International Criminal Court.
Para palang Pilipinas, ano?
Yes. Ito nga ang problema sa ganyang mga organizations. Initially, pipirma, sasama yung isang bansa, pero kapag naaapakan na yung kanyang quote-unquote karapatan, bigla siyang aalis.
Putin was charged of war crimes before the ICC for the illegal deportation of Ukrainian children following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Dean Tabunda says Russia will not recognize the arrest warrant against Putin because the alleged crime was committed when ICC had no jurisdiction over Russia. But things may change if another leader will replace him in the future. He cited the instance where former Yugoslavia and Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic, who has immunity to be tried in ICC, was extradited and tried by the International Criminal Tribunal.
At this point in time, walang enforceability. In the first place, hindi i-extradite ng Russia si Vladimir Putin para magkaroon ng investigasyon ng International Criminal Court. Okay, at this point in time. Pero malay mo sa mga susunod na panahon kasi may mga kasaysayan na may mga precedents na. For example, si Milosevic, he was indicted for a series of war crimes by the International Criminal Court from the former Yugoslavia dahil sa giyera noong 1999 in the midst of war in Kosovo. So noong 2001, hindi na siya ang namumuno. Nagkaroon ngayon ng power struggle. Tapos meron kasing court ruling dati na hindi pwedeng i-extradite si Milosevic sa dahig. Pero in spite of that, binigay pa rin siya nung bagong gobyerno na ngayon ng Serbia dahil ang kapalit naman noon kapag hindi mo isinorender sa amin si Milosevic, hindi namin ibibigay yung mga ipinangakong mga aid coming from the World Bank and International Monetary Fund.
Tabunda says politics still has a role in the ICC, with the US participating in an active role to charge Putin, but the country itself was never a signatory. The United States did not sign the Rome Statute because it deemed the agreement in violation of its constitution. Paulo Ramos for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
China on Monday called on the International Criminal Court, or ICC, to avoid what it called double standards. Beijing issued its statement after the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Russian leader Vladimir Putin on war crime charges. The tribunal also filed the same case against Putin's Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova.
国际刑事法院应秉持客观公正立场，尊重国家元首依据国际法享有的管辖豁免，应依法审慎行使职权，善意解释和适用国际法，避免政治化和双重标准。
Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says the ICC's warrant of arrest against Putin was a sign of clear hostility. Russia has not denied taking thousands of children from Ukraine, but insisted it has done so to protect them. Peskov asserts Kremlin is not a party to the Rome Statute, which means the warrant has no legal force in Russia. But some analysts claim the arrest warrant could restrict Putin's travel to other countries.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping will discuss proposals to halt the Ukraine conflict. The Kremlin said Monday that Beijing prepared proposals that will be discussed during talks in Moscow. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that one way or another, issues raised in Beijing's plan for Ukraine will be touched upon during the negotiations and that comprehensive explanations will be given by President Putin of the Russian position.
The U.S. Transportation Department is considering banning Chinese airlines from using Russian airspace to fly passengers to the U.S. The national security team was reported ordered to require Chinese competitors to abide by the same restrictions faced by U.S. carriers. Sources say the proposal was a result of lobbying by U.S. air carriers who are losing about $2 million annually as foreign competitors are not subjected to a flight ban on Russian territory. A spokesperson for industry trade group Airlines for America says they want President Joe Biden to take action to ensure foreign carriers overflying Russia do not land in U.S. airports. Sources say airlines like China Eastern, Emirates, and Air India benefit from the shortest route to Russia since their countries are not involved in the Ukraine conflict. Since March of last year, Russia closed its airspace to U.S. airlines after Washington imposed its own ban on Moscow aircraft flying over American territory.
Pyongyang says more than 800,000 young North Koreans enlisted themselves in the army to fight against the U.S. This as tensions boil from North Korea and U.S.-South Korean relations. The enlistment occurred days after North Korea fired its biggest missile, dubbed Hwasong-17, amid Seoul and Washington's Freedom Shield exercises. However, North Korea views all such exercises as rehearsals for an invasion. Pyongyang state media describes the ongoing drills as an attempt to provoke a nuclear war. Meanwhile, the president of the University of North Korean Studies in Seoul, Yang Moo-jin, says North Korea is using the drills to justify its nuclear weapons program domestically. Freedom Shield kicked off last March 13 and is ongoing for an 11-day period.
North Korea's state media says Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un led 2 days of a tactical nuclear strike simulation. The military drills included the launch of a ballistic missile. According to KCNA, Kim said the weekend drills had filled the North Korean military units with great confidence. Kim also noted that Pyongyang could only reach its goals when the nuclear force is actually capable of mounting an attack on the enemy. The drills were the fourth show of force from Pyongyang in a week and came during U.S. and South Korea's Freedom Shield exercises.
Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha dissolved the country's parliament on Monday, setting up a general election in May as the former coup leader seeks to extend army-backed rule. The vote pits unpopular former army chief Prayut against the daughter of billionaire former PM Thaksin Shinawatra. A statement in the official Royal Gazette published on Monday announced the dissolution of parliament. The Election Commission will confirm the date of the poll later, with May 7 or 14 tipped as the most likely. The 68-year-old Prayut has demonstrated a longevity that is rare in Thai politics. But in a poll published Sunday of who voters would like to see as PM, Prayut lagged in third place at just over 15%, way behind frontrunner Pai Tong-tarn at 38%.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has arrived in India on Monday for talks to strengthen bilateral relations. Prime Minister Kishida and India Prime Minister Narendra Modi will focus on deepening trade, technology ties, and shared concern about China. India and Japan make up the Quad Alliance with the United States and Australia, which positions itself as a bulwark against China. India and China have been on edge since 2020, when 20 Indian troops and at least 4 Chinese soldiers were killed on their disputed Himalayan frontier. Kishida's visit comes less than a fortnight after Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese was also hosted by Indian Prime Minister Modi for talks. The Quad members deny hostile intentions and stress that they are not a military alliance, but China has described it as an attempt to encircle it. Modi and Kishida are expected to announce initiatives on clean energy, digital trade, and infrastructure as part of the wider Indo-Pacific economic framework launched last year.
New Delhi has accused London of failing to fulfill basic obligations to protect foreign diplomatic missions under the Vienna Convention. This after a protester scaled the balcony of an Indian embassy and tried to replace the national flag with a separatist banner. India's foreign ministry summoned the deputy chief of the UK High Commission to lodge a protest and demand an explanation for the complete absence of British security to protect their flag. New Delhi added they are expecting the UK government would take immediate steps to identify, arrest, and prosecute those who were involved in the incident. Up next, World Health Organization says COVID-19 is now like seasonal influenza. Police in India continue to search for Sikh separatist leader. And the United States aims to end homelessness for more than 38,000 war veterans. Find out more of these stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Sa Counterpoint, alamin ang mga proyektong sinusulong sa Clark mula kay Chairman Ed Pamintuan.
Palagay ko, andyan yung danger with or without these two superpowers surrogating to be, fighting for the interest of Asia. Sila yung nagbabanggaan eh. Sabi ko, huwag tayong magkipagbanggaan sa kanila.
Sa Counterpoint, tuwing Miyerkules alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito sa Net 25.
Pagkaibigan kami niyan, akala niya marami akong girlfriends, hindi naman totoo.
Mga ka-PSL, ako di ay si Gab Dagangon ng Davao Occidental Tigers. Para sa mainit action, sa hardcourt, tutok lang sa Pilipinas Super League. Ito ang liga ko.
Let's get together, so Net 25.
This portion is brought to you by Robic Builders, Quezon City Motor Vehicle Inspection Center.
With the pandemic in the rearview mirror, what is the outlook for COVID-19? World Health Organization spokesman Dr. Michael Ryan says the impact of the virus will be more like seasonal influenza.
And I think we're coming to that point where we can look at COVID-19 in the same way we look at seasonal influenza. A threat to health, a virus that will continue to kill, but a virus that is not disrupting disrupting our society or disrupting our hospital systems.
The WHO says COVID-19 still continues to claim about 5,000 lives per week.
A manhunt is underway in India for a radical Sikh preacher. Amritpal Singh rose to prominence in recent months, demanding the creation of Khalistan, a separate Sikh homeland. During their search for Singh, police have arrested 78 of his supporters. They have also shut down the internet across Punjab state. The population of Punjab is about 58% Sikhs and 38% Hindus. In the past, the region has been rocked by a violent separatist movement. In the 1980s and the early 1990s, thousands of people died in rioting.
Israelis hold nationwide protests for the 11th straight week against the government's planned judicial reforms. They say giving the government more control over the courts is a threat to democracy. In Tel Aviv, thousands of demonstrators blocked roads as they marched through the city center. They wave blue and white Israeli flags and carry banners denouncing the reforms. Similar demonstrations occur in more than 100 towns and cities in the country. Opponents of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's reforms say giving politicians' control over the Supreme Court will weaken its ability to overturn legislation. A counter-protest in central Tel Aviv draws people in support of the government. They raise banners that read "Traitor leftists." There are no reports of clashes between the two groups.
Police and soldiers were deployed across South Africa on Monday as the country braces for protests. This after a left-wing party called for a national shutdown, sparking fears of a repeat of unrest that turned deadly 2 years ago. The country's third-largest party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, has urged South Africans to take to the streets and bring the country to a halt. The EFF is demanding Ramaphosa's resignation over his handling of South Africa's economic weakness, chronic electricity shortages, and high unemployment. Authorities said they were on high alert to prevent and fight any acts of criminality and maintain public order. Parliament announced that President Cyril Ramaphosa had authorized the deployment of 3,474 soldiers to assist police.
Kenyan riot police were out in force Monday for a day of action called by the opposition to protest the country's cost of living crisis despite a ban on the demonstrations. In one part of Nairobi's biggest slum, Kibera, demonstrators set tires alight while several youths were arrested at one of the venues for the demonstrations in the capital. Opposition leader Raila Odinga narrowly lost last year's presidential election to William Ruto. Odinga has vowed that the rallies will go ahead. Kenyans are suffering from surging prices for basic necessities, as well as a sharp drop in the local shilling against the US dollar. A punishing drought has also left millions hungry. Kenyan riot police fired tear gas to disperse opposition protesters gathering outside government offices in the capital, Nairobi, for demonstrations over inflation. Interior Minister Kutere Kindiki issued a statement on Sunday warning that anyone inciting public disorder or disturbing the peace would be prosecuted.
Despite weeks of protests, the French government is holding firm on its bitterly contested pension reforms. The reforms raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Unhappy workers are taking out their anger on politicians. The offices of some members of parliament have been pelted with rocks. Demonstrators held protests in several cities on the weekend. Following 2 nights of clashes, police closed an area in Paris opposite Parliament. Some 122 people have been arrested after they set dumpsters on fire. They made up the majority of the 169 arrests on Saturday. Unions are threatening to shut down oil refineries. So far, strikers have only prevented fuel deliveries from leaving the plants. The piles of garbage on Paris streets as a result of the trash collectors' strike has grown to more than 10,000 tons. The government says changes to pensions are needed to avoid crippling deficits in future decades. But opponents say the reforms hurt low-income workers, women, and people doing physically demanding jobs.
President Gustavo Petro suspended Sunday a ceasefire with Colombia's biggest drug trafficking group, accusing it of attacking civilians. The government says the clan is behind harassment and attacks on people in northwest Colombia over the past 2 weeks. Just before the new year, Petro's government declared a bilateral ceasefire with several armed groups. But almost immediately, the policy ran into problems. The government says the Gulf clan has been supporting attacks by illegal gold miners since March 2 in the Bajo Cauca area of Antioquia Department. President Petro has ordered security forces to resume all military operations against the Gulf clan.
The United States Department of Veteran Affairs announces its goals to prevent and end homelessness for thousands of servicemen and servicewomen in America this year. In Virginia Beach, Virginia, Bernadette Raguini reports.
This year, 2023, the U.S. Veterans Affairs Department, or VA, has a goal to place at least 38,000 veterans experiencing homelessness into permanent housing. VA says it aims to ensure that 95% of housed veterans this year do not return to homelessness. But for those who do, VA says it will work on having at least 90% rehoused by the end of the year. VA says between 2020 to 2022, over 33,000 veterans experienced homelessness, sheltered and unsheltered. Sheltered homelessness means living in places such as emergency shelters, transitional housing programs, or other supportive settings. Unsheltered homelessness means living in places not meant for human habitation, such as cars, parks, sidewalks, abandoned buildings, and literally on the street. States with the highest rates of unsheltered homelessness among veterans are Mississippi, California, Washington, Georgia, and Hawaii. In Virginia Beach, Virginia, Bernadette Regini for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Kenyan government said soaring e-waste affects the health of millions of people in the country. The public is urging the government and international community to take action and protect children from growing health threats. In Kenya, our RT correspondent Omondi Otieno tells us more.
In Kenya, the largest source of e-waste is from discarded electronic equipment and appliances. These items are often imported from developed countries as second-hand equipment and end up in the Kenya's informal recycling sector. While some of the e-waste is generated by Kenya itself, many developed nations are using this country and its neighbors as a dumping ground. Electronic waste is becoming a significant environmental concern in Kenya and the rest of the African continent. The amount of e-waste generated annually is exponentially growing with the increased usage of electronic gadgets, while huge gaps exist in the proper disposal of the waste. With only 4 licensed recycling companies in a country of nearly 50 million people, most of it often ends up in the landfills where it releases mercury, lead and other toxic substances. One of the Kenya's e-waste companies, Iwick, is trying hard to reduce the swelling tide, looking for ways to repurpose the electronic trash.
E-Waste Initiative Kenya is an ungovernmental organization which was started in the year 2015 and got registered in 2016. Our core business is electronic waste management, specifically in the informal sector. This is because we realized that there's a lot of e-waste being mishandled in the informal sector. And so we realized there's a need to start an organization that can create awareness among the informal e-waste handlers.
Electronic waste poses detrimental health hazard to the Kenyans and the environment if not properly addressed. This calls for action by the government and the stakeholders to find proper ways of dealing with the problem.
I think the situation is bad. Here in Nairobi City alone, walking around, you'll find a lot of waste, and if the waste in them, you at least will find e-waste in them. So the situation is worsening, it's bad, and the citizens and the government is not doing enough in handling and disposal of the wastes. So I think about that, we are badly at the moment.
The government is not doing enough because you'll find the e-waste everywhere. You go, they're exposed everywhere. They're being imported in large amounts, and they cause a lot of harm to both the environment and the humans.
Omondi Otieno, RT News, Nairobi.
Tourism in the Gulf Coast region in the southeastern U.S. state of Florida takes a hit because of red tide. Red tide is a toxic algae bloom that affects all living organisms. It can lead to foul-smelling fish kills. These beaches on the Florida coast are normally packed with people at this time of year. That's when thousands of Americans and American families flock to the region during spring break. Tourists are few and far between this year because of the algae. It normally hits during the summer, but this year it has come early. Not only does the algae kill marine life, it can cause respiratory problems in humans. It also has a sulfurous, decaying smell. Resort operators report a lot of cancellations. A heat wave is killing off fish in a remote part of Australia's outback.
Millions of dead fish are rotting in a river near the town of Menindee in New South Wales. The Darling River near the community of 500 is literally choked with fish carcasses. This isn't the first time the heat has taken a toll on fish. This is the third mass fish kill in the area since 2018. Populations of fish, such as bony herring and carp, boomed following recent floods. Now they are dying off as floodwaters recede. Oxygen levels in the remaining water are dropping since warmer water holds less oxygen. For people in the nearby town, the stink of rotting fish has made life unpleasant. A cleanup operation is underway.
Coming right up, Switzerland's biggest bank agrees to buy Credit Suisse. British government funds lunar nuclear reactor. And Southampton fight back stun Spurs. Catch more news when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Together, Sunday 25.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. UBS agrees emergency rescue of Credit Suisse. The announcement came after a weekend of emergency talks in Switzerland, where they will take over its troubled Swiss rival for $3.25 billion. The Swiss government said that the deal was vital to prevent economic turmoil from spreading throughout the country and beyond. The move was welcomed in Washington, Frankfurt, and London as one that would support financial stability after a week of turbulence following the collapse of two U.S. banks. Swiss President Alain Berset was flanked by UBS chairperson Colm Kelleher and his Credit Suisse counterpart Axel Lehmann. Credit Suisse's share price has tumbled from 12.78 Swiss francs in February 2021 due to a string of scandals that it has been unable to shake off.
Shares in European banks sank on Monday despite a buyout of Credit Suisse by Swiss lender UBS aimed at preventing a global banking crisis. The sector's stock Europe 600 banks index was down more than 5% in morning deals. French giants BNP Paribas and Societe Generale fell around 7%. Germany's Deutsche Bank shed more than 9%, and Britain's Standard Chartered off almost 5%.
Asian stocks sank Monday after UBS announced a buyout of Credit Suisse as worries linger about the sector. Asian equities fell in early trade Monday with Hong Kong, Tokyo, Sydney, Seoul, and Singapore all in the red. Hong Kong's monetary authorities sought to calm jitters Monday morning, saying that exposures of the local banking sector to Credit Suisse are insignificant, as the bank's assets make up less than 0.5% of the city's banking sector. Despite that, the city's banking stocks tumbled. HSBC dropped 6%, Standard Chartered shed 5%, and Hang Seng Bank gave up nearly 2%. The drops were in line with the global sell-off and the sector on worries about lenders' exposure to bonds linked to Credit Suisse.
Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP reports that the peso closed today at 54.675 per $1. Last Friday, the peso was higher at 54.71. The peso may strengthen further against the dollar this week as the market expects smaller rate increases from both the U.S. Federal Reserve and the BSP.
The British government reports it funded Rolls-Royce to develop a nuclear reactor that one day may be used to power a lunar base. The UK space agency announced that it commissioned £2.9 million to the company. Rolls-Royce says the plans for the reactor will be ready by 2029. The development of the lunar nuclear reactor is part of the U.S.-led missions to house humans on the moon. NASA's Artemis Mission 3 will launch in 2025, which will mark the return of humans to the moon. The first stage of the lunar base is planned for 2032. Britain says it will play a supporting role in Artemis mission, developing communications, navigation, and refueling technology for the program.
A startup in Japan has unveiled plans to launch balloons to view Earth. Space startup Iwaya Gikan announced it will launch manned viewing balloons into the stratosphere later this year. The company developed the gas balloons with an airtight capsule for viewing tours. It has successfully launched an unmanned capsule into the stratosphere and conducted a manned flight at an altitude of more than 60 miles. The balloon can carry a pilot and a passenger. It would take off from a balloon port in Hokkaido, rise for 2 hours to as high as 25 kilometers, and stay there for 1 hour before a 1-hour descent. The drum-shaped plastic cabin is 1.5 meters in diameter and has several large windows to allow a view of space above or the Earth below.
Net25 held its first Golf Cup today in Alabang Country Club. The successful sports activity was graced by star-studded participants. Vin Pasqua tells us more.
Net25's first Golf Cup was well received by personalities in the entertainment and business communities. Held at Alabang Country Club, the tournament's ceremonial tee-off was led by Sarah Medina, chairperson of the GNW Club Shares Incorporated, the event partner of Net25. Net25 talents graced the event led by former Senate President Tito Soto, Bossing Vic Soto, Aga Mulak, Epi Quizon, Vandolph Quizon, Gary Lin, and Devon Serron. Other celebrity personalities also participated in the tournament, including former Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, Randy Santiago, Derek Ramsey, and Ms. Wilma Galvante, the network's creative consultant. Even if he's not a golfer himself, Net25's Artist Center's head, Direk Eric Quizon, also attended the event in support of his siblings, Epi and Vandolph. A known golfer, Net25's Mata ng Agila primetime anchor and Responde host Alex Santos also took part in the tournament. Veteran news personality Corina Sanchez Rojas, also a Net25 talent now, also graced the event to support the activity. Because of the success of the first Golf Cup, Net25 President Cesar Vallejos says there are requests already to repeat the activity. Vin Pasqua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Southampton fight back stun the Spurs while Chelsea loses to Everton. To give us the latest football news, here's Keith Dimabuyu.
Tottenham manager Antonio Conte lambasted his players after they let a 2-goal lead slip to draw 3-3 at Southampton on Saturday, as Chelsea also conceded a late equaliser in a 2-2 draw with Everton. Spurs look set to leapfrog Manchester United into third in the Premier League as they led bottom-of-the-table Saints 3-1 with just 13 minutes remaining at St Mary's. Speculation continues to surround Harry Kane's future, but it has not affected the England captain's form as he rose his highest to head in his 21st Premier League goal of the season. Chelsea's slim hopes of catching the top four all but disappeared with Ellis Sims' first Everton goal, which snatched a point in the 90th minute at Stamford Bridge. Leeds moved out of the relegation zone after beating fellow strugglers Wolves 4-2 at Molineux. The visitors had won just once in their last 13 league games, but stormed into a 3-0 lead. Aston Villa's fine form under Unai Emery continued as Bournemouth were beaten 3-0 at Villa Park. Victory lifts Villa to within 4 points of the European places. Brentford missed the chance to go above Liverpool into 6th as they were held 1-1 at home by Leicester. From the United Kingdom, this is Keith Demabuyu for Matainang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Britain calls Olympic sponsors to support a ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes competing at the Paris 2024 Games. These sponsors include Coca-Cola, Airbnb, Samsung, and Deloitte. London hopes that the pressure will sway the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, before the next Summer Games in Paris. In January, IOC outlined a roadmap to reinstate Russian and Belarusian athletes under a neutral flag, provided they did not actively support the Ukraine conflict. However, governments of more than 30 countries have asked the IOC for a clarification over the reinstatement of the two countries' athletes. Meanwhile, the International Fencing Federation allowed Russian and Belarusian athletes to join in Olympic qualifying events, sparking outrage in Kyiv.
Australian surfer Blake Johnson smashes the world record for the longest continuous surfing session with 40 hours in Cronulla Beach, Sydney. Johnson beat South African Josh Enslin's previous record of 30 hours and 11 minutes. Records say Johnson rode more than 700 waves. The surfer says he went after the record to raise money for mental health. 10 years ago, he lost his father to suicide. About 300,000 Australian dollars was raised on the record-breaking surfing session. The funds will be used for charity.
Taylor Swift has started her Eras tour featuring a 3-hour set with 44 songs. 80,000 fans attended the first show at Arizona State Farm Stadium. It broke the record for the most concert tickets sold by an artist in a single day at 2.4 million. The show is a massive production with 16 dancers, multiple set and costume changes, and the long illuminated catwalk leading to a second stage. The highlight for many was the full 10-minute version of All Too Well, the song she allegedly wrote about actor and ex-boyfriend Jake Gyllenhaal. It has been 5 years since Taylor Swift last went on tour. The star had promised the show would be a journey through all of her musical eras. The appetite for tickets was so great that it caused Ticketmaster's system to crash. For now, the 52-day tour is restricted to the U.S. It is not known whatever the extravagant production will come to the rest of the world.
New Zealand actor Sam Neill reveals he's been receiving treatment for stage 3 blood cancer. Neill made the revelation in his book, Did I Ever Tell You This? According to him, he began receiving treatment last March for non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Neill shares that he is in remission, but will continue to undergo chemotherapy for the rest of his life. Neill was known for his role as Dr. Alan Grant in the 1993 blockbuster Jurassic Park. His career began in the 70s with different roles in TV and film, including Peaky Blinders, The Hunt for Red October, and The Piano. The actor is currently preparing for a role in a TV adaptation of best-selling novel Apples Never Fall.
In Siberia, Lyubov Morehodova makes use of her talent in ice skating to attend to her chores across the frozen expanse of Lake Baikal. In winter, 81-year-old Lyubov crosses the frozen lake to complete her housework, cow herding, and mountain walking. Lyubov shares she usually travels 4 kilometers or more to the mouth of the Sarma River to meet her cows and return home afterward. Sources say she received a pair of new skates as a gift from an Olympic champion. But Lyubov says she prefers her traditional pair.
We are blessed to begin a brand new week. So for your Monday motivation, here's a quote from American professional tennis player Arthur Ashe. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. So I guess in life you have to give your all, huh?
Yes.
Whether it's on a daily basis or for long term.
Yes, and of course, the first step is always the most important step. So don't be afraid, no matter how small that step is. Take it.
That is so true. If you don't know when to start, start.
Just start. Start somewhere. Start where you are. And for now, that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Ricky Matay.
And I am Nina Richielago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.